Thank you very much for having me. So a little bit about me. I'm an Eastside Catholic grad. I hear we have some, yeah? There we go. Does anybody do work study or work in the lunch line? No? I did. And I made it to the top, so it's possible. It's great to see you guys here. A little bit more about me, because I often stay kind of behind the scenes. We started our company in 2008, which was basically when everything hit the fan. So not necessarily the best time. I gave up all my 401k, quit my job, took out every penny we had in our house, lived off 2 years of no salary, and just kind of prayed for the best. And it's been an awesome ride, and ultimately in 2008, 2009, most of those companies didn't take money, and so we learned a lot about the benefits of not taking money, which now I can kind of share with you guys as we go. So the first thing is, it can truly be hazardous to your health in the form of, it's a really scary moment when you give up everything to pursue your dreams. And so here's an example of kind of what I was talking about. This was me back then. Whoops. Let me go back, cue the video. So that definitely happens. And it's good to get those out early, by the way. You'll get used to it by the 10th or 11th time. But that was me. I mean, I can only imagine that guy. He probably, I think I could hear his heart stopping, right? And so it's very hazardous. I doubt he's still married after everything he gave up. So it's a really tough scenario to be an entrepreneur. So I admire everyone here who's doing that. So we're going to talk a little bit about other hazards, though. There are the traditional hazards, which is raising money takes a lot of time. It takes away from building the team and building the product. But I'm going to talk about some of the other hazards that are a little bit less known. So the first one, and this is all through the lens of about 6 different phases that a startup goes through. The first one is tech risks, right? So what can go wrong when you're building tech? Nothing's really impossible to this room. This is a low risk for us. We know how to do this in spades. This is probably Seattle's biggest collection of geeks, so we know how to build stuff. The issue really is every time you get into a VC pitch, they change what you ultimately could potentially be. And so it's scary. They say, can you do this? And can you do that? And you're tempted, especially in the early days, to say, yeah, I can do that, or yeah, I can do that. And then they say, name that tune. And next thing you know, you're not living by your vision anymore. So the technology risk is really a tough area, in the very beginning stage. I don't think it's one that we all have to worry about, but at the end of the day, they're answer shopping you. If they see that you don't have focus, then they're probably not going to invest in your team. Speaking of some of the early stages that we go through, when you're asking for kind of the initial investment, there's 3 rules that I live by. First one is, don't forget to ask for the check. Every time you take an angel meeting, ask for the check. I'm surprised at how often I'm presented with an offer and they don't actually ask for money. It shocks me, but it happens all the time. You're not going to get money unless you ask for the check. So ask for it. And right out of the gate, practice on your brothers, your sisters, your mom, your dad. My dad was one of my first investors. I feel like I conned him, frankly, because I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. But it turned out to be great because I took his money and I said, yeah, my family backs me. So therefore, I started to get the next one and the next one. And I had the help of all my team and our former CEO who's actually here, Kevin Foreman, who's over in the corner, who helped us start an amazing company. And we're 6 years later profitable, and we'll get to a little bit about that. First one is ask for the check. So don't forget that. Second one is anything other than a yes is a no. If they say, hey, I want more information, or 2 weeks from now, or something else, just move on. Do yourself a favor, especially in the early days, and move on from that. It's okay. You're going to get a lot of no's. Take the no in stride, regroup, go hit another well, and see if you can get some more money. And then the third thing is, and this is really for VCs, not necessarily angels, is if they give you a hard no, and they give you some reason like they didn't like the market or they're oversaturated in that investment, chances are it's the team. So as you start to get a bunch of no's, you really need to look around for different elements of your team that may or may not be performing. So once you get the money, now you've created kind of a problem. First thing you have to do is figure out, I built something, can I essentially give it away? Is there a market there for whatever it is that I'm looking for? This is a great thing for a VC because they'd love you to give away your product and get millions and millions of eyeballs and never make a dime, because ultimately for you to scale, you're going to need more and more of their money. And so it's great that you got the money, but eventually it's nice to actually make money. You just have to realize that a venture capital firm kind of is in the habit of growing your business off of their balance sheet. They obviously say they don't want to give you more money, they want you to be successful, but at the end of the day, if you're successful and you're getting 30 million eyeballs and you're on your way to 300 million eyeballs, they'd love to give you more money, right? And so giving it away for free is a great idea, but making money's even better. But at the end of the day, you do have to give your product away. We at Point Inside gave our application away for free back in 2008, 2009, when people were debating, should we charge for it, should we not? Obviously, nowadays, you got to give everything away for free. Second one is, can you charge for it? I'm talking like charge a penny for it, charge $1 for it, charge $2. It doesn't really matter. The question is somebody else going to write you a check for your product or your technology? Get through that process. I think where venture capital and some of the board influence starts to come in this phase of it is that they don't really value this process of giving something away and charging for it, even though it's a loss. They'll evaluate that contract with your first customer 10 different directions. And even though you know you're selling it at a loss, they may not, they want to talk about pricing, and they want to talk about trying to get more out of it or trying to add scope to the product. That's great, but at the end of the day, you and your team need to prove that you gave something to somebody else and they actually wrote you a check for it. And so this is a good phase for everyone to get through. I still should apologize because we actually sold our first thing to the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce, of all things. And frankly, it was a really rough experience. I'm on the Bellevue Chamber board now, so I don't feel too bad about it. But we negotiated the contract all the way down. We essentially threw in the kitchen sink. If they told us to build a building in downtown Bellevue, we said, sure, we'd do it. No problem. Just tell us how much you're willing to pay us. Once they told us how much they were willing to pay us, we felt like we got past this step because somebody was willing to pay us something for something. And so we obviously walked when we figured out we couldn't build a building on the probably $1,000 that we charged them. Long story short is, it's an important step. You want to go through it. Your team wants to go through it. Don't let the venture capitals talk you out of taking that step. After you're done with that, you really want to get into profit. Can I actually profit from it? Can I price it right? Can I actually make a little bit of money off this thing? Again, venture capital, not necessarily in line with wanting you to be profitable, because every time you're profitable, what happens? The valuation goes up. So yes, out of one side of their mouth, they're going to definitely say, hey, I want you to make money, and it's a great thing for you to make money. But what happens when you make a bunch of money? You obviously don't need their money anymore. So it becomes kind of a repeating issue of, if you have the money, you don't need their money. Therefore, when they sit in on the board meetings and things like that, they'd rather take that profit and focus it back on growth or focus it back on something else that could grow the business. It's not a bad strategy. I'm not saying it's terrible. VCs are really, really smart. I shouldn't just hammer them. I realize that today I'm playing with fire, which is why I'm wearing my Smokey the Bear shirt. And there's nothing more hazardous than giving this talk. I may never get funded in this town again. But I digress, because it's one of those scenarios where you just have to realize what you are dealing with every time you hit one of these phases and what their point of view is going to be on your balance sheet. So profitability is not a bad thing. Definitely one you want to shoot for as quick as possible, and then sock away that money and build your cap table and your balance sheet. Next one is, can you scale? This is where you're more advanced. Now you've probably got money. You've taken your board from you and your co-founder and your favorite friend or whatever to 3 or 4 more people. Now you're outnumbered in the company, and you have this whole question of, where should you go next? How do I scale? And where venture capital can impact this is, they have ideas around, well, I think you should go international, or I think you should go into this other market. For Point Inside, we're an indoor mapping company, and we focus on the retailers, big box retailers, because that's where people spend time and that's where all the money is. But I can't count how many times they say, you should go into hospitals, you should go into daycares. You should go into campuses. It's a great idea, but it's really, really distracting. And it happens, every second Tuesday of every month at the board meeting. So how I started to figure out how to scale the business was I actually learned it from Jim Carrey. And the answer was, at some point, you become less restrictive and you start saying yes to everything. And you just literally spend a year saying yes. When John Cook asked me if I'd essentially throw my career away by bashing VCs, my answer was yes. Why not? Can't hurt. Might as well. I'm going to get something out of it, hopefully sooner or later. Maybe I'll go work for one of you guys one day if I can't get funding. So it's one of those things where if you say yes to partnerships that you didn't want to say yes to earlier, or maybe even you say yes to taking on more money when you don't need it, or you say yes to entering a market, just saying yes does a lot for your business, especially after you've proven out profitability. You have the money to spend, so you might as well start saying yes. I think what you have to watch out for in the VCs and the community is, just simply put, they want you to hit the latest thing that has traction. We were at a time, Kevin and I, when we originally started, and they tried to pivot the company towards a daily deals Groupon model. This is an indoor mapping company, right? Like, daily deals, I get that they're big, and Groupon was blowing up, but what are you gonna ask us to do next? Be Uber? It's just not gonna work out. So if somebody asks you to turn your gyrocopter into a juicer, you should just try to put them back in their seat. This is your vision. You gave it all up. You were that guy. You made it through the moment. You made it through profitability. Make sure you hang on to that. And best case scenario is if you don't have to take a bunch of money, then you're in control. These are moot points. We raised $7 million. We have had really no issue, thankfully, but then again, there wasn't any money to raise when we were growing up. After scale, you got the last step, which is, can you execute? And this is really a point where you're hitting on all cylinders, which is great. But unfortunately, perfection is the enemy of progress. And so you really have to find a way to advance the company. And when you ask that question of a board, especially a board of venture capitals that are looking at an exit horizon of 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, they're solely focused on, what have you done for them lately? And so that's, again, not a bad thing, as long as you have a healthy amount of skepticism going into the process, which is really what I'm trying to convince everyone here to do. Radio Shack is a scenario where they hired a CEO to turn the company around. CEO said, okay, here's the plan. We're going to shut down 1,100 stores, right? And we're going to repivot the company and rebrand it and everything else. Now, they were probably dead on their own. It's a tough thing to revive when you're Radio Shack, but regardless, the only people that got in the way of that were the investors. And I'm not sure exactly what they got out of it. I think it was a real estate play, but the point is, there's a straight up example of where it's literally your investors that block you from progress. And so they could do two things. They can either distract you and make you overheat and overspend and become a unicorn, or the opposite, they can essentially take a perfectly good idea and shut it down. And so those are, that's kind of the last thing that you want to look for. So those are the 6 areas of risk that you have to navigate as a startup. And like I said, I'm not saying don't take money. I think that venture capital folks are some of the smartest people we have. They're definitely our friends, but a healthy dose of skepticism goes a long way. I like to think of them as obviously putting their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. The thing that I think I often don't give them enough credit for is they worked their ass off. They started out low as an associate, then a senior associate, and then they made, some sort of junior partner of the firm and then a partner of the firm. And they also got people to give them money, and they invest money, and they're accountable. Doesn't that sound a lot like an entrepreneur? It does to me. So long story short is they're great people, but healthy dose of skepticism can go a long way when you're starting your company. Go Crusaders. Thank you very much.